Hello and welcome back to the Collector's Corner, the podcast that demystifies art collecting with me, Antonia Piersanti. Today I'm interviewing Klaus Mertens, a discreet but very active Berlin-based collector who also sits on institutional advisory boards. Klaus most recently founded a deep tech company, but he has had an interest in contemporary art since he was a student and started acquiring works together with his wife a few years ago. They slowed things down with the arrival of their kids, but they remain committed to building their collection. And they particularly favor artists who have ties in some way, shape, or form to the Berlin art scene. With Klaus, we spoke about the ways collecting takes you to places outside and within yourself that you might have never expected, how, in general, most people tend to buy too early, and more broadly, the power and responsibility that come with having both the ability and the privilege to purchase art. We also talk about some of the artists Klaus collects, and I'm sharing some photographs on the podcast Instagram account as Klaus is not active on social media himself. This was such an insightful conversation, so many actionable tips from a collector who's truly committed to bringing artistic voices of our time to the forefront. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Klaus.
Hi,
How are you?
very well, thank you. It's a sunny day. Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you for having me. Really grateful to be able to see your collection in your home here in Berlin. It's wonderful.
Thanks. Pleasure to show it. I always love talking about it, talking about the pieces, the stories behind them, the artists, and yeah, great to show it again. It's been a while.
Where you're from originally?
Near Frankfurt.
Frankfurt.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've lived in Berlin a few years now.
Yeah, about 12, 13 years.
And you have two businesses, I believe.
Yeah, several. So, and in the most widest of senses of the word, I'm multi-entrepreneur and consultant, working mostly freelance, but also leading a tech startup, managing some sort of more established businesses. So yeah, entrepreneurial in the widest sense.
My understanding is you work quite a lot in property development.
Yeah, that's one part of it, although it's probably not the most sort of emerging. It used to be, but it's not something that I pursue strategically. Sometimes I still do it for clients. I would love to at some point help a museum or collection or something like a noticeable or art actor to help develop a great collection, building or premise. That I would really love to do. So far it hasn't come around, but that's the kind of projects I like coordinating. Currently the focus is more on material science and tech, where I've had the opportunity to lead a startup, which is slowly coming on track.
And on the side you collect very actively.
Yes, trying. I think it was more before we had two kids. We can still drag them to some museums and exhibitions, and so yeah, we do get to see art, my wife and I.
So how did it start? How did you get into art and then collecting?
Yeah, good question. I would say there was a few, in retrospective, there was a few sort of singular events which you can, in hindsight, sort of maybe pull a line through. So a very early impression was my granddad, who collected terribly boring sort of saloon art.
Saloon art?
Like semi-good paintings and sometimes even replica and stuff like that, just to have his house full of landscape pictures, basically. Another event was probably me getting very interested in the photography school of like the Düsseldorf school, all the Bernd and Hilla Becher students. So I was actually into photography quite early, but didn't collect at the time. And perhaps a triggering event, in hindsight, a big mistake, but what's a mistake? I was once in Simon Lee Gallery in London when I was still a student, and I saw a print by Chris Wool. And I thought, oh, this is a nice print. And it was only like £6,000 or £8,000 at the time. And I was close to just buying it just because I liked it. And then I thought, no, hang on, this is more than you spend in several months as a student just paying for your accommodation. You can't spend that on something hanging on the wall. In hindsight, I should have. But anyways, there was something in me which had this interest and perhaps some sort of an intuition of what might be relevant pieces. And then eventually I think when we moved to Berlin, there was just so much gallery scene around it that we initially, I and later with my wife, we just really enjoyed looking at the pieces, meeting the gallerists, meeting the artists. And yeah, that's kind of how it started.
As a student, you were already going to galleries, looking at art regularly.
I wouldn't say regularly, but I definitely had an interest there. I mean, I always had an interest in music, everything from heavy metal to Baroque, and always had an interest in architecture. Always had an interest in fine arts. So there was always curiosity there. It was really the Becher students where I started to systematically try and capture what a generation of artists were sort of about, right? And what they were kind of trying to say and what drove them in their being avant-garde at their time, right?
It sounds like for someone who doesn't come from that sort of background, you weren't intimidated at all by that whole world.
Yeah. I like sort of spheres or worlds that I don't know anything about. For example, I started just 3 or 4 years ago playing the oboe because I like the sound of it. So again, it's probably just saying, I want to know what it's about, right? So let's try it.
Yeah.
I don't do it with many things, but if I have a real interest in something, then I would usually just go about it. And there's a felt barrier to enter into the clean white world of a gallery where there's only someone sitting doing seemingly important things, and things on the wall are expensive, and the director is usually far away. But then after a while, you notice you can just go in, look at it, go out again, as long as you say hi and bye. It's nothing special, right? And if you ask about the piece, people are happy to tell you about it. It's up to you how much you reveal about yourself by asking more or less stupid questions. And you just have to find your way. After a while, you also realize, at least sort of in smaller galleries, if you have a genuine interest in the piece and you might potentially even buy something, people are very open, right? Of course, you probably shouldn't start walking into Gagosian and wanting to see the director, right? That's probably not going to work. But especially Berlin or I don't know, Vienna or I don't know, Torino or whatever. All these cities are, I would say, generally open to young collectors just wanting to browse young galleries, right? And that's, I would say, where the exciting things are happening at the moment.
How would you describe your collecting approach?
Yeah, good question. I think I started having an approach with an idea of a more or less clear limitation of focus. It was, interestingly, it wasn't photography or Becher School or anything. At the time, it was actually, I started being very fascinated by abstract painting in the, what was it, late 10 years. And we just browsed through my collection, and you can tell there's some abstract painting, but by now a lot of it is photography, performance-related documentation, and so on. Although, interestingly, a lot of the artists are actually educated painters. Okay. You still have that element. I started with this idea of, I'm interested in abstract painting, right? And there was a few positions that I ended up acquiring that were totally outside of that of that definition, right? And it was dead clear to me. For example, when I saw the first picture I bought from Julius von Bismarck, it was dead clear for me that this is a great piece and a great artist, right? He was very young at the time, few years after finishing university, but it was so dead clear that I said, like, okay, it's not abstract painting, but who cares? It's great. I want to have it.
Had you met him?
Yeah, I have met him personally. At the time, I hadn't. So I just saw this at a fair and didn't know anything about him, apart from the fact that his last name is familiar in Germany. But no, I just said, this is a great piece of art. And I ended up buying it. And so the point is really having a concept of collecting is maybe a good starting point to have some self-delimiting or some self-limiting. Or some self-limitation to start somewhere with your point of focus. But it actually collecting becomes interesting in the moment when you sense something about art or you want to go beyond these limits. That's when it's interesting. Although I think in a way, if you can define what you're interested in and what's in that relevant set, it's not interesting anymore because you've already defined it. The interesting thing about discovering new positions and new art pieces is that you're interested in them because of something that you cannot grasp yet.
Mm-hmm. About yourself, you mean? Or
at least consciously. It's definitely subconsciously, I would say, that there must be something drawing you to those pieces. But at the time, I didn't know yet why I liked the picture by Julius exactly, or why I thought that, he might be a great artist. And it's those moments, I think, which are really decisive. And in turn, I can think of many acquisitions where I've sort of made a more, let's say, academic fuss about it. And I thought, like, oh yeah, this is painting and this is great piece, and it has an interesting formal aspect that it contributes to some dialogue and so on and so forth. And I like the piece. I still like the piece. But in hindsight, I would also say that kind of reasoning is inferior to intuition.
It does sound like you are mostly guided by this gut feeling and spark that you get in front of a piece where you can feel it's important and it resonates with you, even though you can't define why.
Yeah, that's a strong element, definitely. Yeah.
Do you still take these more academic aspects into consideration though before you buy? Does it play a role?
Yes. Doing it super properly is beyond the time invest I can make, unfortunately. So if I wanted to do a systematic screening of, before every Artissima or every Art Cologne or every Art Basel, even if I just screen the positions of 20 galleries that I'm interested in and what they're showing, and I systematically went through are they relevant or not, you would spend your whole day researching artists' CVs and so on and so forth. And I think I wouldn't want to do that because I'm not an art historian, and I want to have sort of spontaneous joy element in the whole process, right? At the same time, of course, you over time develop a sense for what's a CV that reveals a good founding within a network that is relevant of an artist. And let's be real, right? The success of an artist is his quality or her quality of work, but it's also the network that they're swimming in. What are early exhibitions? In which institutions? Where have they been educated? Who were their teachers? All of that is relevant, especially also, and yeah, of course, price is a factor we have to talk about. In order to gauge price, it's always important to look for museum shows, solo shows in non-gallery institutions. In which collections are they already, like official collections, and all of that sort of gives you some clues as to whether the price of a piece of work, besides complexity, size, etc., the price is warranted from the artist's CV and the piece, right? But at the same time, I think if you like the piece, if you can spare the money, always think that you're also supporting people who've devoted their life to creating beautiful things, and if you think they're beautiful, then they're it's fully the purpose, right? That's, I think, the best reason to buy a piece is if you like it, if you admire it, right?
That's the number one criteria. I agree. You always buy from the galleries?
No, not always. So some artists I met pre-gallery times. Some artists in the collection still don't even have a gallery, and then we buy directly from them.
Where do you find them?
So buy the book would be go to the end of year shows in UDK and Städelschule and so on and so forth, because there you can see what an artist totally fresh from school is capable of putting out, out of his hand and mind, without usually any sort of commercial or other considerations there. It's very pure what you see in terms of talent. I frankly rarely manage to go to these shows, so it's usually a bit more luck and just chance meeting people. So
recommendations, maybe also from other collectors or friends, gallerists.
Yes, also actually mostly recommendations from other artists, because if there's one group of people within the art world who really know who the good artists are, then it's the other artists, right? Not everyone always says truthfully, right? Because there's of course also competition between artists. But if you have a good connection to other artists and they admire other people's work, it's a strong indicator. Yeah.
That's a good tip. So besides the artists, have there been any influential figures in your collecting journey?
I think I never looked for a, let's say, neutral mentor or someone where I said, like, this person has a great collection and I want to know how they did it, and I want to replicate it my own way, right? I think I just always enjoyed going by my intuition and my research and my own impressions. Of course, very influential, and you have to discount what they say sometimes, but you also have to trust them in some ways, are gallerists, right? And I think very notable name to mention here is Daniel Mazzona, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years back. He was the greatest example of a truthfully acting, honest, and sort of explaining gallerist who would open you the doors to understand the art he had in the program. He would also give you opinions or his views on other positions. You could always tell that if you're asking him things about positions that are too far away from his very minimalistic taste, then he just wouldn't know anymore. So he also had his focus. But he really gave you truthful information and then leave you alone with the decision. And I very much enjoyed that. And it's a real, his passing away has really left a black spot for me personally, but also in the gallerist scene in Berlin, maybe even internationally, I would say. And then other gallerists that I've been talking to a lot are Sebastian Klemm, Thomas Fischer, Alex Levy, the guys from Raum 3 Gallery in Cologne, Jakob and Dennis. So yeah, there's a bunch of galleries that of course we're closer with compared to others. But yeah, we also still discover new galleries, new positions, and so on. If you stick too much to the galleries, then I think you limit yourself to not discovering everything that's out there, right?
Yeah, I actually have a question about that. Do you feel that as a private collector, you have a responsibility to support maybe underrepresented artists or younger emerging galleries?
Responsibility is a big word. I personally approach collecting with a sense of loyalty to the people, especially artists that I meet in the process and that are spending time with me and that share their work and that open their studios for me to visit and so on. So there's just this element of connecting with the artists also on a personal level, and talking to them about why they make the art they make, how they make it, and really getting a feel for or learning more aspects of why this art might be touching you. And then, of course, I think in that moment, it's far beyond a, let's say, commercial transaction. You see a piece in the gallery, you like it, you buy it, you pay for it, you get it, and then if you like something else, you might buy something again, but if not, then not, right? In the moment where artists really take the time to meet with you, talk to you, invite you to their studio, there is, of course, this personal connection and tie. And then there's sort of responsibility aspect that you asked about, I think comes in the moment when you might realize, okay, maybe this artist is not going to be the next, I don't know, Gerhard Richter for sure, and maybe not even a superstar or medium superstar. And you, even in the moment when you think like, oh, okay, he's doing stuff that I really don't quite understand anymore and maybe not even visually like so much. There's, for me at least, definitely a sense of loyalty to still, of course, be in touch with those artists. Buying things that I don't like, I would not do, because, I think it would just be wrong, right? But of course, we stay closer to those artists that we know, and even closer to those that we've had a lot of personal interaction with. Also, if we know that some artists are maybe having a difficult time financially or something, then that can of course influence buying decisions.
That's a good point, because you do have several works from the same artists in your collection. So those are, I suppose, the ones that you have developed close relationships with over time.
Not always. It's also just because we found their development super exciting in every step, and we just wanted to have a series of works representing their journey, right? But there's probably some correlation between who we know and where we have several pieces. Generally, like taking someone into, let's say, the collection is, we try to make it a decision of accompanying that position or that artist over time, including repeated acquisitions. But there's, of course, also sometimes a financial limit. So some artists that we start collecting quite young, they're so expensive by now that we simply can't afford their current relevant works anymore. We could go for editions and so on. But then at some point, I think it's also fine to say, we've got 3 great works. Yeah. He or she is on track. Other people can do their bit to in startup lingo, to scale the business further, right?
Kind of nice though, looking back then at an artist you supported a few years ago and you see their career really taking off, even if you're no longer in that league financially, knowing that you've played a small role, a small part in getting them there, must be a really nice feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
Very rewarding.
Yes.
Do you actually sell works sometimes? Have you ever sold any of your collection?
No.
No.
And it's also not planned. Again, some advice. Don't spend any money on art that you expect to get back.
Right.
Ever. Because, especially not on young contemporary art, because chances are that the pieces are hard to resell very, very high. On a few positions, you might be lucky, and there might be a market emerging within, I don't know, something between 5 to 10 years. Yeah. But that's then again mostly those pieces which you don't want to sell, because it would significantly harm your collection, right? So yeah, big piece of advice: only spend money that you can spare.
Yeah, that's good advice. Do you have a long-term vision for your collection?
The vision, I think, is enriching our families' lives with the meaning and the beauty of the work, and yeah, enriching the artists' lives with showing them our interest, right?
Mm.
I like if our pieces travel. So whenever we get a request to show something or to give something on loan for an exhibition, we always do it. I think art should be more than just hanging on the wall or standing in private rooms.
Yeah.
So I think any opportunity to show it in settings other than fully private settings, I'm very open to. But there's no long-term vision, not yet. It's a good point to think about, actually.
I guess one thing I wonder about is, there's all this great art that sits in private homes, and a lot of collectors I speak to, they really want to be able to share it with a broader audience because it deserves to be seen.
Yeah.
But it's hard to pinpoint what can private collectors do to make that work more accessible to the broader public beyond, like you said, lending works for specific exhibitions, but that's more reactive. So I wonder if you ever thought about that. Is there what can be done
Yeah.
from the private collector's perspective? Opening a museum, I mean, that's that's out of reach for many collectors. I don't think you need to be able to get to that point to even be considered a collector.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's other things that can be done.
Yeah. I know groups of collectors who get together and sort of have curated group shows out of their collections. And there's always combining or themes out of which you can make connections. And a good curator, I think, can make a good exhibition out of 3 good collections easily. It's of course always a question, like, where do you show it? How do you get the space? How do you get the people? Because of, even just putting 20 works into a medium-sized hall, flat, old factory, whatever, is a significant effort. And just coordination and making a concept and so on. But I think what would be great is if gallerists, for example, as their summer shows or something, maybe said, hey, we have in our network 3 or 4 really interesting collectors with great collections or interesting collections. It can be famous names, can be less famous names. Let's have a curated summer show and maybe also place a few new pieces that are still available, because the gallerist, of course, also wants to sell something. Bring new people together, bring new art pieces together, and so on. So that could be a nice one. Actually, I might suggest that to some gallerist friends now that we talk about it.
I read that you are on the board of trustees of Haus Waldsee. Is that still the case?
Yes, it's the so-called Trägerverein.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a eingetragener Verein association. Yeah, consisting of 20 members who are sort of more active in organizing the financial and administrative and so on backbone of the house.
Yeah. We
don't interfere with the artistic program. We just organize the process to appoint the artistic director. So Anna Gritz, who is currently there, she was appointed in a selection, or from a selection committee that we recently organized, or that we put together. And yeah, so I'm very active there. It's a great institution.
Can you describe what it is and why this is important to you? Why you chose to join that institution specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. Haus am Waldsee is a small museum in non-profit Trägerschaft, as you'd say in German, in Zehlendorf. It's in a beautiful old villa by a small lake. It has a magnificent, like super nice garden where you can sit, and has a nice cafe and so on. So it's a really nice place to hang out, first of all. But as an art institution, it also has an interesting history because it was actually one of the first institutions to show contemporary art after the war in Berlin. And even before that, it had some history. So, for example, I just recently learned that the Berlin Philharmonics had one of their reconstituting concerts in the garden of that house after the war again. So it's always been this sort of island of culture in the southwest of Berlin. And I guess why I got hooked by it is the house is just super beautiful in an area that's close by to where we live. It's just a spot where I almost felt immediately home or homely, at least. It's not a huge sort of anonymous institution. You meet everyone who's active there quite quickly. I knew a couple of people who were also in the Trägerverein, and there was this. Also, when I joined the Trägerverein, there was this time of change. The prior director had been there for several years, and then there was this window of opportunity of appointing someone new who would, and actually successfully, bring a completely fresh crowd of urban Mitte art lovers to Zehlendorf, and have them understand that Berlin is not only graffiti walls and U-Bahn, but is actually also very, very many green trees and nice lakes and so on in the southwest, with which a lot of people don't know when they came as expats to, I don't know, Mitte or Neukölln, or not even as expats, maybe just coming from Cologne or whatever. So it's this kind of mixture and this time of change that the house was in. And
when was this approximately?
This was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago,
right,
that I joined it. And yeah, it's just great to see Anna as a director and her co-directors to really put up great shows. It's rewarding to try and help them as much as possible, organizing financial means, which is of course with Senate budget cuts at the moment is not super easy. And it's just a great community of people loving art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. Do you sometimes think about what artists and entrepreneurs can learn from each other?
I do now. I would say every artist, in a way, is a small and sometimes even significant entrepreneur. If you look at some of them managing their larger production studios, but even much earlier, they have to be. So artists have to be not only artists of the art they create or of the techniques and media that they work with, but they also have to be artists of self-promotion, right? And of course, not in a sort of dull or pure marketing sense of the word, but the art world has its very, very special sort of rules and do's and don'ts in terms of how you self-promote as an artist. For example, never send an unsolicited set of reference works, or Mappe, we say in German.
Like a portfolio?
Yeah, like a portfolio to a gallery.
You mean unsolicited?
Yeah, don't do it.
Why not?
Well, I don't know. It's just not done. At least as far as I'm informed, right? You always wait for the gallerist to say that you should. You also don't, as far as I know, you don't apply as an artist to be exhibited in a museum.
So you wait until they come to
you. Of course, it's all by invitation. But anyways, that's one particularity about how artists should not promote themselves. So there's all sorts of other things. Do they go on social media? Do they not do it? Do they rely on one or two promoters, agents, gallerists, whatever, or are they in German, Hansdampf in allen Gassen themselves and self-promote, etc. So there's a lot of these questions which every company nowadays has to ask itself as well. How do we generate attention, right? And the other way around, what I think entrepreneurs can learn from artists, looking at some of the artists that I like, taking Julius von Bismarck with his crazy undertakings in nature, or Fabian Knecht setting up gallery spaces in the midst of a forest to have a photo of a forest in a gallery, or Pratik Vijay that I've recently been looking into, who essentially tries to sneak himself into Victoria and Albert Museum in order to stage a potential theft of a colonial sort of piece of art that was stolen in colonial times, and just the kind of the big stories and actions they sometimes have to stage. That is very, very entrepreneurial, and I think entrepreneurs can definitely learn from that no limit, no border, can do attitude, right? Of course, there's other realities, there's accounting rules, and there's certain laws and so on and so forth. But this attitude of, just thinking without any limitation, I think is a great skill. Yeah.
It's just really creative approach to bring that to every aspect of your entrepreneurial endeavor. And some thinking outside of the box. I like that a lot. So what's something you wish you had known when you started collecting?
I think the one insight that you don't realize when you start, there's just this extreme oversupply or over availability of pieces of art that will never ever be bought, right? I'm saying this, as something you need to realize, but that you also need to be cautious not to exploit, because as someone who can potentially spend 2, 3, 4, or even more thousand euros on a piece of art, it gives you a lot of power, because you're totally free in making the selection. I buy this and I don't buy that, right? And you're potentially deciding over someone's career, life, monthly income, whatever. But you have to realize that you have sort of, by the nature of the over availability of artworks, that you have this power, and at the same time you have to be responsible with it. But just knowing this, I think, gives you a, or I would have liked to have earlier, this consciousness or this knowledge of, there's endless possibilities, and it's really your decision, and make your best pick of where you put your resources, right? And at the same time, I don't regret any of the spontaneous early buys that I made. But in hindsight, I think I would also give the advice to everyone: buy later than you want to buy. When you're in a gallery and for the first time you think like, I want to buy this, maybe wait another year.
Yeah.
At the same time, I know how hard it can be, because when you stand there at that point in time, you've talked to the gallerist, you maybe met the artist, you've understood the whole oeuvre position. You think, this is great and I want to have it, and so on, right? And for the joy of having it and making your first acquisition, which is also a step over a doorstep that's important to go at some point, at that time you think, it feels absolutely right, and I now need to do it. And
there's a FOMO element too, right? You think, if I don't get it now, someone else might. I might not have the opportunity again.
Exactly, but that whole issue of not having the opportunity again, there's countless art pieces, so there's always other opportunities. The question is just like, will you regret for the rest of your life not having bought this piece, right? Yeah, generally try and buy as late as possible. And also for people who only sporadically look at art and consider acquiring pieces here and there, I would also say, if you haven't been to a show or gallery for a couple of months, so you haven't seen at least, 10 different positions in the last half year or something, don't buy anything that you get excited about, because if you don't look at enough art in a certain period of time, you get excited just for the sake of seeing some art, but
just the novelty.
Just of seeing something again, and you might think like, oh great, I'm finally seeing some art again, I have to buy it, it's so great. But you make good decisions by seeing a lot of things and comparing and seeing how you resonate with different things and so on. So I think to make really good decisions, it takes a constant self-exposure to many positions and works and conversations and so on.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good advice. Yeah, definitely. Got a couple more questions. So we just had Art Basel in Paris, Freeze in London, Art Cologne starts tomorrow, I think.
Yeah.
Any events? I mean, you have small children, so I know it's tricky.
Yeah.
But are there any art events that you never miss in the calendar?
There's many art events that I would love to never miss. Gallery weekend in Berlin, Art Week in Berlin also are great ways to see a lot of art when you're based in Berlin. Art Cologne, I try to go again because it's just a day trip. Art Basel, not a must-see thing for me because maybe a bit too much of a circus. And then, I mean, of course, high quality, you see a lot of artworks that, you know, you would be totally astonished by seeing them in a museum when they're presented in the appropriate way. Of course, also at a gallery booth or at a fair booth, they also look great, but it's so overwhelming as a fair that there's no way you can appreciate the quality that's hanging there in that amount or in that density, right? Artissima in Torino, and then there's very good shows in Paris and in London. I personally think unless you're interested in Asian art or something, or American art, you don't even have to go overseas. You have enough good things here. But because we knew we had limited time and to some extent also limited travel and other budgets, we always said let's stick to artists that have some tie to Berlin. So
that's nice. What's the last artwork you purchased?
It's from Salomé Chatriot. She's a fairly young French performance artist. Absolutely stunning performances she does using a device that she breathes into that then controls a sound installation, which people find themselves in the middle of. And it's usually massive loudspeakers. So it's a physical experience to feel the sound, and seeing her breathing into this device, and out of the data that this sound device or breathing device generates, she creates digital pictures and actually then paints them by hand using a very sort of artificial acrylic lacquer onto steel plates, which have a very artificial feel to them, very fascinating. And what really got me interested in her is, so first again, a totally emotional or gut feeling bond to her work. I just couldn't get it out of my head for I think almost 2 years. So here again, wait with buying. I saw her pieces, thought it was great, didn't buy, always circled back to it, and now after 1.5 years said, yeah, I need to do something there. And I think she just has a lot of sort of relevant topics in her work. It's a very daring performance she does as a woman. Watch her performances, you'll see why. And then she generates through a digital intermediate process, again, something analog, like an analog painted object out of that, which again has a very artificial machine-like feel to it. Yeah. So therefore she has all these elements of, breathing as the most basic human instinct, up to AI, computer graphics, etc. But again, painting as a material. So very, very dense and I find strong work.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, definitely look her up. How would you describe your collection in one word?
I would say surprising to myself. And it relates to what I said earlier. It collecting, I think, becomes interesting in the moment when you get drawn to something that's outside of what you thought was your interest.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good way of describing it. Who's one artist on your wish list?
An artist that where I really admire the works, and I've so far never done anything, also because he's a bit too old for the kind of age range that we try to stick to, is Callum Innes. He's a Scottish painter and just has these very, in a way, simple but fascinating, nearly minimalistic, colorful paint or color-based paintings that you just get drawn into, and it's definitely something to still consider.
And finally, who's a collector that you look up to?
Ooh, also a good question. I'd say any collector who really, with his resources for buying, but also his time resources and so on, really puts himself or throws himself into the art world, and not just acquiring things and exhibiting somewhere for people to look at, but who would participate on juries, set up prizes, be active in that scene. I think that's people where I would say, like, it really proves that they don't do it just for status or because you do it if you have a lot of spare money or whatever, but for people who really want to be part of the art world and the people that devote their lives to art. Yeah.
That's a really nice note to end on. Thank you so much, Klaus.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode of The Collector's Corner. If you enjoyed it, do follow the show and leave a short rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps more people find these conversations. And if you've got thoughts, feedback, or someone you think I should talk to next, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop me a message on Instagram or through the website, thecollectorscornerpodcast.com. Thank you for listening and for being part of this growing community. Until next time.